Okay, well, here we go. I believe it's June 1st today. And my name is Mark Wallace. This is True North Ministry, where we live the Word and we walk with power. Today's topic is Speed Up Your Deliverance. And we're still in our series on countering the effects of the Satan effect. So here we go. So speed up your deliverance. Have you ever thought that God seems a little bit slow in answering your prayers? Have you ever wondered why others seem to enjoy their healing or financial deliverance while you still wait for yours? Or have you ever questioned your ability to believe for your own personal deliverance? If any of those answers, any of those questions rang true, this teaching is for you. Now, we all know that God inhabits eternity and that He's everywhere present, that He fills all things, that He owns the universe, and that He's already supplied each and every one of our needs. But that being said, don't you think we should all have our need met all the time? Now think how powerful God is. Inhabits eternity. He knows what you're going to need in 10 years, in 5 years, in 5 minutes. He's had 1,000 years to work on it. Why don't we have everything we need? Why don't we have the health that we so desire, or the finances? There has to be a reason, and therein lies the lie. What's keeping us from our deliverance? And I'm going to go right now to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. We're going to read verse 3 and 4. And this will help understand this. It says in verse 3, "But if our gospel be hid, it's hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them." There is a force. There's a power out there whose sole purpose in life is to hide the blessings that God has already supplied for us. That's why you don't have everything. Now, you go through phases where everything starts clicking. You get everything. You want health, it gets money, you get there. You need a house to sell, you need whatever. It happens. Then there's times where it seems like you can't even buy a blessing. Why? There's a reason. Today we're going to discuss two basic spirit types. And one gathers information and the other acts on it. And together they control the globe. And if you can learn to detect this and understand how this works, it'll help you get your deliverance or speed up your deliverance. Now, one of these spirit types is mentioned more times than any other spirit in the Bible. And the other one that I'm going to talk about is only alluded to in figurative analogies. One resides in deep cover, while the other gets people to seek guidance or an information source other than God. And this is always the trick, to get you to go to a source other than God. And I'm talking about familiar spirits and the highly secretive and never seen or named information grabbers, one time in the Bible called a bird of the air. And these are not one and the same. One gathers intelligence, the other utilizes it. One is a gatherer, one is an operator. And a while back, it was a number of years ago, I was with Josephine at a checkout. And the woman, we paid cash for this item, and the woman said, "You sure look good for 56. And then Josephine, her eyebrows went up, and I didn't really catch it. We walked out, and then she goes, I said, "Did you hand that woman your driver's license?" She said, "No." She says, "There's no way she could have known my age." You know, so what it was, when somebody knows information personal about you, it always has to be, I mean, in a situation like that, not we're talking about somebody with a computer, Nowadays had a cash register then. It has to be spirit driven. Now, it wasn't like a big deal, but she wanted me to ask a follow-up question to Josephine, how did you know that? Because these people have trained themselves to get information, and then they want the respect or the kudos or the name. And you're going to see how this familiar spirit really runs the world. And I'll prove that in just a few minutes. It's not one spirit either. We'll get to that. In fact, I might even show you how many there are, which might just blow your mind. Now, this might be a little bit scary, this stuff. And a lot of people don't like to think about this. In fact, most people don't even believe it, that there are spiritual entities out there. So now we're going into clandestine or covert. Now, one spirit gathers information in a clandestine manner while the other manipulates others covertly. And there's a difference. The term clandestine and covert are not synonymous. A covert operation is only designed to conceal the identity of the sponsor or the person who set up the operation. A clandestine operation is in itself concealed. It should never be known to anybody. And so clandestine operations carried out in such a way that the entire population should go unnoticed by the entire population. A covert operation gets people to think that they themselves have opened the door to a hidden power or information. The attention gets brought back to that person, yet the person who sent them is never noticed. And we'll see how this is huge. And the whole purpose is to break down our believing. The whole purpose is to break down believing, because if we don't believe, we don't receive. Can you do the works of Jesus Christ if you don't believe? No, you can't. It's all designed to break us down. This is why we don't have all our need met at times. It's because our believing has been broken down. Our focus has been diffused or distracted. See, evil spirits secretly and stealthily control the tides of humanity. The rise and fall of countries and cultures, as well as the rise and fall of many individuals, are moved by these familiar spirits. The verse we're about to read is not just talking about non-Christians. It's talking about people who suffer from a believing breakdown. Every lack in our life is due to a crack in our believing. We can't blame anybody else. It's easy to, and we want to. Now remember, that verse we read earlier was a letter that Paul wrote to the Corinthians. This is about 57, 58 A.D. And Corinth was only 50 miles from a city called Athens. And it was just a little further to a city called Delphi from Corinth. And the letter was written to a group of people who were raised to believe in multiple gods and to seek spiritual decision-making information from mediums. This was just their norm. And you think, oh, that's a crazy culture. Our culture is just the same. It's just hidden and it's guised differently. See, when the ancient Greeks and Romans had to make life decisions, they always consulted their gods. By casting dice, by interpreting dreams, by analyzing things like lightning, leaves, flying birds. But for matters of the most importance, they sought out the oracles, and the most respected of whom was the Oracle of Delphi. And people still do it today. I mean, just look at sports. People won't shave. They wear a hat a certain way. They wear an undershirt. People do different things. Probably when people go to battle, they'll do certain things the same way every time, just for that luck, or just for what they think would be protection. It's normal human behavior, but it's still a manipulation, because God said He supplies all our need, and that He's our protection, that He's our forward and rear guard. He promises it. It doesn't matter how you wear your hat. You see, that may help your believing maybe, but you get it. you don't need a rally cap with God. And so people do it today. And did you know that most of our presidents and almost all world leaders, even today, they sought out and they still seek out spiritualists to help them handle the tough decisions? They still do it. Look it up. It's spooky. You won't even believe some of the names you're going to see when you just look it up on Google. Some of the people you think were the greatest presidents ever were actually consulted more mediums than anybody else. It's really sad. Both parties. I'll get to that in a few minutes. Now we're going to read the same verse that we read earlier from the Message. And so it's 2 Corinthians 4, 3 and 4. And it says, if our message is obscured to anyone, it's not because we're holding back in any way. No, it's because these other people are looking or going the wrong way and refuse to give it serious attention. All they have is eyes for the fashionable god of darkness. They think he can give them what they want, and that they won't have to bother believing a truth they can't see. They're stone blind to the dayspring brightness of the message that shines with Christ, who gives us the best picture of God we'll ever see. The entire Greek and Roman culture was built upon believing in many gods. Paul boils it down to two. The Creator, who's the Father of Jesus Christ, our Father, and the devil, who Paul calls the God of this world. So that shows you who's really running things, who's manipulating things. And I'll show you how in a few minutes. It's crazy. And the devil's goal is to distract you from your prize, to keep you from your healing. It's to get you to take your eyes off the Christ and focus on your problems, focus on the world. And this was both the temptation of Christ and of Eve. It's always question yourself, your belief system, and then look to the world. It's always the downfall of humanity. A little bit of spirit goes a long way. And the Bible doesn't individually name many spirits, but it documents their effects on human beings. The few that it does categorize must be important if we humans are to fend off or avoid the attack. You guys and girls who've been in the military, don't they work tirelessly to figure out where the enemy is and what they're doing? Sure. It's not just chance. Even before there was all these internet and satellite communications, I mean, they use all different ways. Civil War, Revolutionary War, they had spies that went out. Well, this is just multiplied, what we're about to get into. But the Old Testament mentions time and again familiar spirits, mediums, wizards, and the elusive bird of the air. Gospels mention deaf and dumb spirits, but highlight the unclean or impure and lewd spirit. Acts speaks of the spirit of divination, which we're going to get to today. And the epistles add spirits of bondage, spirits of slumber, the spirit of fear, spirit of antichrist, the spirit of error, to name a few. And Revelation goes back to that lewd, foul spirit, not to mention the beasts, plural. Look it up. It's more than one. And there's two spirits that we're going to cover today, like I said, familiar and the bird of the air. And understanding their effect on society and on Christian is paramount. If we're going to have deliverance, we have to understand this. So let's start off with the bird of the air, or as I call them, these information grabbers, these investigative spirits. Bird of the air. And these guys are clandestine, not guys. And many times they're confused with familiar spirits. Now, these have been around since God first created the angels. And whenever Lucifer fell, when he wanted to have the same place as God, when he wanted to be like the Creator, be like the Most High, he got kicked out of heaven, so to speak. He no longer had the same place. Well, a group of the spirits came with him. And these and some of these are the birds of the air, and you'll find that it's not just one or two. And these are the ones that only investigate and index. And as far as I can tell, they don't possess, they just collect. And they gather information and disseminate it. And so, and you don't have to turn there, but Ecclesiastes 10:20 says, curse not the king, no not in thy thought, and curse not the rich in thy bedchamber, for a bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which hath wings shall tell the matter. So, again, be careful what you think and what you say. You ever had somebody know something about you that they had no business knowing, and they tell you? It's sort of weird when people do that. I just mentioned one with Josephine, but it happens. And people, there's more information out there. Of course, now just social media, they know a lot of things about you. But this doesn't take a lot of explaining. These are the network of fast-moving clandestine spirits that accumulate information about every human on earth. And these are also the ones who locate weaknesses in each individual from a very early age. Other spirits exploit these weaknesses. You have been watched since you were in the womb. And your movements have been categorized and cataloged according to your threat level. And the more you go according to the course of the world, the less of a threat you are, because you're just doing what the enemy wants. Once you take a stand for God, you're in a whole different place. Whole different place. Remember that one record where the one spirit said, Jesus I know and Paul I know, but who are you? You know, so they knew. They knew these guys. They knew them by name. Don't think you're not known. Don't think you're not watched. Now, it's spooky. Can be. Because then you wonder. I mean, if it wasn't for this, what happened to our children? What happened to us as teens or whatever? What happened to different people in our lives where the rug just got pulled out from under them? There's a reason. You ever have a time you go, it couldn't have happened at a worse time? Grandpa dying, mom dying. It couldn't have, losing the job, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. Me hurting my ankle, couldn't have happened at a worse time. Well, you know why? Who knows what the worst time is? And he's going to manipulate these things so they happen like that. It's just the course of the world. Now, we can circumvent this stuff. We can find our abundance. We can live above this. Remember, let's just say that there was 3 archangels. 2 of them didn't leave, which means there's probably 2/3 more angels fighting for you than fighting against you. It's just the world, it's just been trained to be so negative. And our lifestyle deteriorates, over time, and then it's harder. See, Lucifer was the angel of light. I want to talk just a second about speed. Let's talk speed here. I was watching a race on TV yesterday. Forgot which one it was, but it was fun to watch the cars crashing, and they're driving 200 miles an hour, and they overcorrect one time and they're in the wall. They can never ever let down. Well, Lucifer was the angel of light. So let's assume that a spirit can travel at the speed of light. And light travels at 186,000 miles per second. It can circumnavigate our globe at the equator 7.5 times in 1 second, the speed of light. Now, just to compare this, an average passenger liner, jet passenger liner, moves at 500 miles an hour. It takes 4 hours to get from the East Coast to the West Coast. And that's 8.3 miles a minute. It's pretty fast. To further compare, it takes 1 second for a jetliner traveling 500 miles an hour to pass over a football stadium. 1 second. That's fast. In that same second, one spirit could go around the earth 7.5 times. Our earth is 25,000 miles in circumference. That's fast. That's why you can't see them. And sadly, they can move through stuff. They can, and probably in the time that I've been teaching, you're listening to this in your car, you may be sitting here, you're on a phone hookup, whatever. You've been checked out multiple times. And then Christians always go, oh, that wouldn't happen. There's no way. I'm sharp. I've had a class. I would know if there was a spirit around. No, you wouldn't. You would be a lunatic. You would be a raving lunatic if you knew every time a spirit was around. Wait till we get to the numbers here. You see, now we're going to talk about spirit population. I'll call it infestation. Revelation 5:11, you don't have to turn there, just write it down if you want to look at it. But it says, and I beheld and heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts and the elders. And the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of thousands. These are the angels. 10,000 times 10,000 is 100 million. And then it adds thousands of thousands. So there are millions of these spirits. And a chunk of them watching. Just think of the globe. Just think of lines going around it. Easy. It's just a network. It's the course of the world. It's just a network. You are being watched all the time. We are with satellites, right? Cameras. Anywhere you go, somebody's watching you, right? Pretty much. Unless you're way out in the country somewhere. But then you got your telephone and it has GPS, so you're still being tracked. I mean, it's crazy what man has done, but spirits have this down. So imagine 100 million things moving at the speed of light. What kind of ground could they cover? Jesus Christ, who's also in a spiritual body, and he's working right now. And it said in the Gospels that wherever 2 or more believers meet, he'll be there. And I used to think that was figurative. Now I realize he could literally visit every church every Sunday and touch every single person moving at that speed. Now think about that. He literally could be there. Anytime you're talking to somebody. Just think, he's not that far. In just a split second, he could be from the other globe right to where you need him. Any angel that he would send. I'm telling you, we are not helpless. I'm not trying to show how hard our life is. I'm just telling you that let's speed up our deliverance by speeding up our thought process about God. I once was a pest control salesman, not a glamorous job, not. And I walked into this one call, and when I go in, I'm holding my little clipboard with the contract on there because I always figured I was going to get the sale, and it sounded like things were raining on it. And what it was is I walk in, and there were so many roaches in this place. They were falling from the ceiling, and it was like rain and just dropping on this contract. After I made the sale, I got out of there, and I just took off as many clothes as I could and shook everything. It was creepy. I've been in houses where there's so many mice, you couldn't look and not see at least a dozen. It's nutty. It's an infestation. There's an infestation of spirits, but you can't see them. They move too darn fast. Now we combine speed with the infestation. Now, if one spirit can get a visual on every person in your town in less than a second, what could 100 million do? And they can remember things. It's not like our memories. Imagine 100 million satellites and drones and cameras spying on you. They are. I don't know about 100 million. Probably is. I mean, just think what man's done to spy on itself. Look at Google. You can find anything, almost about anybody who's touched a computer key, even past presidents. See, there's more help for us. It's incredible what we're up against, but the cool thing is that God is everywhere present at the same time, that he has 1,000 years to take care of your one day. Yet we don't believe it. We think we have to go to the doctor all the time. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying we're just so ingrained and used to doing things the way the world says that we don't even expect God to come through. You pray for, somebody asks you to pray for them, and then you pray and they're just the same as they were the next day or the day before. And so we make these excuses in our mind. We go, well, I guess their believing wasn't there. Or you could say, I guess my believing wasn't there. Or you could say, maybe it wasn't God's timing. Just think about the excuses that you've heard or thought in your own mind. It wasn't God, it wasn't the right time for them to get healed. And we just make excuse after excuse after excuse for our weaknesses and our sicknesses and whatever. I'm not saying that we're never going to get sick. Why would healing be made available if we weren't going to get sick? Right? I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you have a cold or something. All I'm trying to say is we have to think bigger. Think eternally and not just locally. You know, and that's what the devil's done. He's just gotten us to shrink our believing or our expectation of believing. There's twice the angelic beings that are out to help you. In fact, even the Christ is working overtime to keep the enemy at bay, show us our way. But it still takes believing. It still takes believing. What breaks down believing? Words. Words. And I remember Josephine and I we were in a car. It was super cold outside, and we were riding with some guy, and his van broke down, engine blew, and then we had to walk, and I had to get back to the place that we were living at that time. So we started hitchhiking, and and it was pretty wild. We were on this challenge where they gave you $15 and you went somewhere. We hitchhiked across the country and then came back, and you had to come back with the same amount of money. Well, Josephine wanted a little coffee, and so spent a little bit of her money. And we were in this one parking lot of a truck stop, and there was nobody there. It was dead. There was no trucks in the park. There was nothing, and it was a huge parking lot, like you see at these gargantuan truck stops. And we asked every trucker in there, sitting on their little stools, and nobody would give us a ride, or they weren't heading the way we were going. And so we walked back across this parking lot, heading back towards the interstate. And next thing I knew, there was a guy standing behind me, and he said, "You kids need some money?" And we turn around. It's like, "Where'd you come from?" You know. And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, and he pulled out this wad of money, and he said, "How much you need?" I said, "We need $5." And and he didn't ask why. And he just peeled $5 off, handed it to me. And then we thanked him very much, and we took off, turned our back, and started walking across this huge parking lot. And then I thought, I want to turn around and thank him one more time. I turned right back around. This is like 2 or 3 seconds later. He's gone. Now, that was just for a challenge. And God sent an angel. Or a real fast guy. I mean, he could win any Olympic race there was. If You can cross that parking lot in 1 second. But I mean, God is so concerned with every detail of your life. Everything. And he can do anything to make it happen, but we have to believe. That's the breakdown. You know, with all that help, how can we ever fail? The familiar spirit. This brings us to number 2. And this brings us to this next spirit. This is the world shaper, the familiar spirit. This is a biggie. This controls the earth through words. And it may not be as flamboyant as murder. It may not be as hurtful as suicide. It may not be as devastating as a home wrecker or a thief or a robber, but it's sought after by presidents and world leaders. They love and require the information of this familiar spirit or these familiar spirits. And it's still happening today. You know, they're covert. And the name for familiar in the Hebrew is Obi, just spelled O-B, like Obi-Wan Kenobi. And these are hard to pin down because they come in so many disguises, like mediums, advisors to presidents, horoscopes, Ouija boards, divining rods. It could be, there's so many faces. The little text you get about your sign, you know, that day you're going to have a good day today because you're a Sagittarius or whatever. And people believe this stuff. Where'd that information come from? Not the Bible. Yet we all think it. Well, I'm born in this month, so I'm this kind of person. Well, now just think what you just said. Where did that information come from? Yet almost everybody does it. In the 70s, it was, you know, what's your sign? You know, it was a big pickup line, you know. But when I was a young forestry student at Stephen F. Austin State University, the land of tall women and virgin timber, I was taking a geology class, and the teacher was teaching us how to locate water. And there's certain soil types where water is typically found. And there's certain plants that always grow near water. You see the cottonwoods as you go, they'll always grow near a water source. And she also taught the class about and how to use a divining rod. And she took us on a field trip. And there was maybe 50 kids in this class. And she had multiple classes. And these are kids from all over Texas and other places in the country, all forestry students, all raised in different cultures, different Christian religions, probably different Christian groups, and she took us to these willow trees. Everybody cut off these little Y-shaped sticks, and she said, hold it a certain way. And these kids, I knew what she was doing, so I told her I wasn't going to participate in this assignment. I said, I'll tell you the answer that you want on the test, but I'm not going to do it because it crosses with my beliefs. And so these kids held this thing like this, and as they walked close to a water source, each and every one of them, I watched them, 50 sticks bent. And the kids were like, what? These kids, in 5 minutes, learned how to operate a devil spirit. How long does it take us to learn how to operate the Spirit of God? Shouldn't even take that long. But they totally expected it to happen. She used the wires, too, these two little wires shaped like an L. And when you come near the water, they would just cross like that. And it worked every time. Spirit. Now, you think spirits can't go through stuff. Well, how would they know where that water was deep under the earth? They can go through the earth just like you can, walk out this door. It's nothing. These are powerful things. Someday you are also going to have a spiritual body that's going to be similar to what Jesus Christ had. He was here, he was there, he could change looks. It's going to be incredible what we're going to have someday. You see, but the point is, the point here is familiar spirits. These kids, do you think they're going to, those kids grew up, you think they're going to show their kids how to work those things? So it just gets passed on and passed on and passed on. I had a grandmother who taught my cousins how to levitate each other. And they would say a certain thing and put their hands on each other and raise them in the air when they were laying down. And these kids would float. I saw with my own eyes some of my family members all sitting around a table, and they put their hands on top, touched their fingers, and then they asked the table to rise, and I saw the thing float in the air. And then begin to answer questions, tap 3 times, yes, or this kind of stuff. I mean, it's weird when you're a kid seeing this stuff, but that's familiar spirits. It's getting you to get used to accepting information coming from a source other than God. Anything that gets you to believe that God doesn't exist. It's the same thing. When you replace God for anything else, a divining right. Could God show you where that water was? Yeah, but we don't believe it. Was there any purpose in those kids finding water? They didn't dig. We didn't need a well. This is East Texas. It rains all the darn time. You see, it's piney woods. You see, they didn't need water. So, I mean, I didn't need that $5 for anything, yet God supplied it. God will supply even things you don't need. Isn't that crazy? Think of him as so big, he's going to give you more than you can even ask for. Oh, doesn't Ephesians say that? Ephesians 3:20? You can have exceeding abundantly above all that you ask or think. You can have more than you can believe for, and that's an impossibility. That's spirit. The spiritual side of you, the spiritual side of God can give you more than you can even believe for. It's fun. Why not tap into some of that? You see, today, through time, of course, these people, these world leaders, they consult some type of medium or horoscope to help them make critical decisions. Lincoln saw visions in a mirror. Yeah, Lincoln. Churchill and Hitler both sought war advice from mediums. Isn't that funny? 2 different sides. Oh, Nancy Reagan proudly controlled and color coordinated her husband's schedule via her personal astrologer. Reagan. Hillary Clinton was known to regularly seek advice from a New Age medium. Just look it up. Then they try to cover it up when it gets exposed. Whereas a few years ago, they were proud to say that. Now, of course, it looks bad. Every president does this because the decisions are too great, and nobody believes that God will actually direct them. So they go to mediums. People have all kinds of advisors. And the only way you can tell, even if they have a name Christian or they wear one of these things or they run a big church somewhere, it doesn't mean they're not a medium. See, if their end game is world domination or thought domination, it's always from the wrong side. The end result's the only way to tell. See, a familiar spirit offers an easy way to open up to spirit contamination. It's the easiest way. You know, I once had a friend who was a mature Christian and a minister, and who opened up to a familiar spirit, and he lost everything. He was a volunteer minister, this guy, and in the evenings he would drive a taxi to make extra money, and he told me one time, he said, I was riding along with my brother, the other night, and we got everything worked out. I said, man, that's great. That's really great that you did that. And he said, and he cocked his head and he looked at me and he said, my brother's dead. I said, what are you talking about, man? How did you talk to your brother? He goes, well, I was driving my taxi the other night and he appeared in the seat next to me. And we worked everything out. We got all our problems, all our family issues worked out. And I said, that was not your brother. That was a familiar spirit. He goes, no, it wasn't. It was my brother. I said, no, it wasn't. I says, you know from the Bible it says when somebody's dead, they're dead. And there's no remembrance in death. It says that in the Bible. The dead are dead. Why would Christ need to come back and raise people from the dead if you're already up? Right? Why would there be a resurrection if everybody was already alive? It's ridiculous. And but he said no, it was my brother. It was my brother. And I told him, is it a familiar spirit? No, it's my brother. Well, he said, it's my brother. He came back from the dead to talk to me. This guy ended up getting divorced because of this. He lost his whole congregation. He lost his job. He lost his family, and he rejected the truth. Ended up alone. It usually doesn't end well when you open up to that type of information. I remember when I was a kid, I wasn't a kid, I was in college, and I heard on my bedroom door. I was home visiting, and I had another relative that was at the house too. And I said, what do you want? And they go, I want to tell you what the Ouija board said. And it's like early in the morning. I thought, what are you doing the Ouija board, early in the morning? I didn't even know we had one in our house. And I said, I don't want to hear what it said. I said, Mark, I want to tell you what the Ouija board said. I said, I don't want to hear what the Ouija board said. Mark, I'm going to tell you what the Ouija board said. And then he just said it through my bedroom door. I was captive. And he said, I asked the Ouija board what the best Christian group to get involved with was, and it spelled out the name of the group that I was involved in at that time. And it was a bit spooky to hear that. And of course, I should have run, knowing what I know now, but the crazy thing is it's so deceptive. Which way do you take it? Is it trying to trick me? Is it not trying to? Is it telling the truth? Is it telling a lie? Then that's stuck in your head and in my relative's head. What would they think? It's crazy stuff. We're going to read a New Testament example here, and we're going to have to move through this. Go to Acts chapter 16, and this is how the Apostle Paul dealt with the familiar spirit. And it's awesome. Now, this is before any of Paul's epistles were written, Acts 16. Acts 18 is about when he began writing epistles. So there was no written scripture except for James and Jude, and those aren't very big. And those are really given to the people in Jerusalem. So there was only thing that was taught is what he taught, what Paul taught. And Acts 16, verse 9, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. There stood a man of Macedonia and prayed him, saying, come over into Macedonia and help us. You see, here Paul has a vision. This is not a familiar spirit. It's God. See, the devil always tries to copy the Creator. Remember, he wants to be like him. Wants to be like him. Except for that love thing. That old love thing. And verse 10, and after he had seen the vision, immediately we endeavored to go to Macedonia, assuredly gathering that the Lord had called us for to preach the gospel unto them. And see, Luke, the physician and the writer of Acts, is with Paul on this trip. How much fun was this going to be? And whenever we see the words we or us in Acts, it always means that Luke is on that particular adventure. Verse 11, therefore loosing from Troas, which is in the northeastern Mediterranean, we came with a straight course to Samothracia, and the next day to Neapolis, and from thence to Philippi, which is the chief city of that part of Macedonia. Macedonia is still where Macedonia is today. It's just Greece and then Macedonia. Some of you have been there. And from thence to Philippi, chief city of Macedonia, and a colony, and we were in that city abiding certain days. Philippi was a Roman colony. A Roman colony began as a military outpost for the Romans when they first took it over. And then as time went on, when they conquered that land, they gave that land leases to the people who fulfilled their time in the Roman legions. And that's how the Romans repopulated and shifted the population of the earth. They'd move out the inhabitants and they'd just take their land and give that land to people who served their 20 years or so in the legions. And verse 13, and on the Sabbath we went out of the city by a riverside where prayer was wont to be made, and we sat down and spake unto the women which resorted thither. And a certain woman named Lydia, a seller of purple of the city of Thyatira, which worshipped God, heard us, whose heart the Lord opened, that she attended unto the things which were spoken of Paul. See, this woman made a living selling this purple dye that was leached out of a particular shell. And purple's like a popular color. It's a royal color, an expensive color. And I love how God respects this non-Christian and also heard her prayers. And he sent Paul and Luke to help her learn more about the Christ. But it still says she worshiped the Creator. There's people out there who aren't even Christians who still worship God. Isn't that crazy? It's wild. This is after the day of Pentecost. So could it happen today? Is there righteous people out there living in a land that is not a Christian land? Yeah. And when she was baptized and her household, she besought us, saying, if ye've judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and abide there. And she constrained us. And verse 16, and it came to pass as we went to prayer, a certain damsel possessed with a spirit of divination met us, which brought her masters much gain by soothsaying. And this spirit of divination was operated by this young slave girl. Okay? And people would sell their children into slavery. And if you were chosen, which I'll get to be one of the oracles of Delphi, even if you were married and you were chosen, you had to leave your family and donate your life, the rest of your life, to the temple of Delphi. And so she made her masters much gain. Soothsaying is operating that familiar spirit. So she would tell people, would ask her questions, and she'd tell them, should I start this business? Not a good time. There's Hollywood actresses that do this, and they won't sign a contract until their astrologer or their medium tells them sign it at 2:37 a.m. And that's when they'll pick up the pen and sign it. They just run it. People have their muses. It's a familiar spirit. They get their, I don't know how the song came. It just all of a sudden appeared to me. There's very popular artists that talk about their muses. It's familiar spirits. We're just inundated with their words. And she was a medium, and the term divination is called the spirit of Pythia. This is interesting. The term Pythia comes from the word python. Python comes from the Greek mythology of the Greek god Apollo killing a giant python on that spot and letting it rot. This is Delphi. And a Pythia is a lady who is or was or could have been being trained to be the oracle of Delphi. Now, every girl holding this title was the most protected and coveted of anyone in Greece as well as the entire Roman Empire. They were the spokesperson for God. They were it. And a Pythia, Delphi is in southern Greece, about 50 miles from Corinth and 50 miles from Athens. It's walking distance. And there was an oracle in attendance there, one after the other. They usually had 3 at a time in case one got sick, and then 2 would platoon. They would take turns being this oracle. And from about they say 1400 BC to 393 AD. That's how long this Oracle of Delphi. And for you history buffs, the Oracle of Delphi tradition began not long after Moses' 40-year exodus from Egypt happened, and they began to take the land of Canaan. So that's how deep this goes. And during the period of the Delphic Oracle, well, some of the people who talked about it and mentioned it in their writings were pretty good intellectual guys named Aristotle and Plato. They spoke of the Oracle of Delphi, maybe even visited them. And when they only spoke one on the 7th day of every month. And then there was a line of people, and they'd have to go through a purification process to even meet the oracle, who had to herself go through a purification process and have a goat sacrifice. And then it would be according to rank. If you were a city leader, you were at the front, or a Roman general, and then it went on down from there, because they're the ones making the world decisions. The devil wants people who are in positions of power. That's how you manipulate the masses. And so these women, some of them were educated, some were not, but they were all mediums with this familiar spirit. And they would sit on a 3-legged stool over this crack in the earth where steam came up, because it was where 2 fissures were right in that area. It was on a volcanic zone. And they don't know if that did something to them or not, but they ate laurel leaves and other type of leaves, and then then they would sit over this crack, and nobody could go into that room where they were, only them. Nobody was allowed in that room. So they'd stand at the doorway and ask their question, and this person would go into a trance and then begin to answer them in a voice many times that wasn't her own. Some of you have seen this. And not in Delphi, I'm sure, unless you're really old. And but they're all learned and trained in how to utilize the spirit of divination. And over the entrance of this temple were carved the sayings, "Nothing in excess," and "Know thyself." Very intellectual sayings in this temple. Remember, the Greeks were pretty intellectual people. 17, the same followed Paul. Now, this woman with the spirit of Pythia, possibly one of the oracles of Delphi, we don't know, but it's the only place it's ever used. And she made a lot of money. And people gave lavish gifts to the oracles of Delphi. They would build structures and give huge sums of money to get the information, because it meant, they would, before they went to a battle, should I do this battle? Should I not do this battle? Generals still do it today. Don't think they don't. Presidents still do it today. It's crazy. And the same followed Paul and us, so Luke was still there, and cried, saying, "These men are the servants of the Most High God, which show unto us the way of salvation." Now, I know some of you have been taught that she said this sarcastically because it's a spirit of Python. That has nothing to do with it. Pythia was the area it was. Whoever taught you that didn't think. They didn't read, you see. I mean, it's just a place. That's all it meant. But what this woman did, she was an oracle. What she was saying was true. But the thing is, she attracted the attention back to herself. That's covert. Never show who really sent her, where she really got that information. See, it's hard to tell. And a writer named Sally Quinn, who once investigated the Capitol's astrology habits for the Washington Post, said, quote, "I was amazed at the kinds of people who actually made political decisions based on astrological charts," End of quote. But though many of the power elite consult astrologists, she says, quote, nobody admits it. They all do it, but nobody will admit it. You could have the most Christian, crazy looking hair, and come from the most Christian state in the country and still be into spiritualism. And 18, and this did she many days, but Paul, being grieved, turned and said to the Spirit, I command thee in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out that same hour, and her masters saw that the hope of their gains was gone. So could she give information without the Spirit? No. And they caught Paul and drew them into the marketplace and unto the rulers, and they put them in the inner prison, a death chamber. And they beat Paul. Now it doesn't say Luke was here now. Luke must have been watching from the sidelines. He was a physician. He might have figured things were going sideways. But Silas was there. And then it turned out that Paul was a Roman citizen, and it was illegal to beat a Roman citizen unless it went to the emperor and he gave permission to do it. So these guys were scared. But the jailer eventually, we don't have time to read the record, but the jailer who housed them, eventually, he wanted to hear the word, and his whole family got born again. But the cool thing here is I just wanted you to see that there's more going on that you don't see than you can imagine. 100 million plus. Moving so fast, but you got more on your side. More on your side. Every need should be met. Every call should be answered. Every prayer should be. Have you ever thought that God was being a bit slow in your answer in your request with a prayer? Now you realize that God isn't slow. We're just distracted by information gathered and disseminated by these spirits. That's why we don't have what we have. That is a Satan effect. How do we circumvent that? We better open our eyes, and we have to have that spiritual connection. With that, we can do exploits. See, countless times, what we say, what musicians sing, what you see on TV, it's just words and thoughts and images going into our minds and hearts, and it redirects and diffuses our believing. It's time to just get back to the pure, uncut beauty of God's Word and the awesome, dominating power of Holy Spirit. And in doing that, we will speed up our deliverance because we're staying focused on the goodness of God and His limitless supply. God bless.